A letter? That's all you got, my cousin Bradley laughed, waving his inheritance paperwork, $2.3 million in trust funds, while the other relatives tallied their windfalls around the attorney's conference table. Grandma always did think you were hopeless, Evelyn. Guess this proves it. My 14-year-old daughter Maisie hugged me tight, her body trembling with secondhand humiliation, while I sat holding the plain envelope that apparently represented my grandmother's final estimation of my worth. But why did the family attorney, Mr. Nathaniel Cross, clear his throat with an expression of barely suppressed anticipation? And why did his next words silence every smirking voice in the room? Perhaps you should open the letter, Ms. Winters. Before anyone draws conclusions. I slid my finger under the envelope's seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper containing coordinates, an old brass key, and one handwritten sentence in my grandmother's elegant script. The real inheritance is where we buried our secrets, my darling. You were always the only one I trusted to find it. The laughter died. What does that mean? Bradley demanded. What secrets? I folded the letter carefully and stood. I suppose I'll find out. My grandmother, Eleanor Winters, had been the family matriarch for 63 years. She married into wealth. My grandfather's family owned textile mills that had prospered for generations, but she built her own empire within it. While grandfather handled manufacturing, Eleanor had invested in real estate, quietly accumulating properties across 3 states. By the time she died at 91, her estate was worth approximately $47 million. The will distributed most of it predictably. Her 4 children, my father's siblings, received the bulk. Their children, my cousins, received generous trusts. The houses, the investments, the jewelry, all parceled out according to Eleanor's careful calculations. I received a letter. Not even a piece of jewelry or a token bequest. Just an envelope that my cousins had immediately interpreted as confirmation of what they always believed, that I was the family disappointment, the black sheep, the granddaughter Eleanor tolerated rather than loved. But I knew something they didn't. Eleanor and I had shared secrets they couldn't imagine. The coordinates led to a property I'd never heard of. 2 hours north of the city, deep in the Adirondacks, surrounded by forest so dense the GPS signal flickered uncertainly. Maisie and I drove up the following weekend, the brass key heavy in my pocket, the mystery consuming every mile. Mom, what do you think she left you? I don't know, sweetheart. But your great-grandmother never did anything without reason. The others think she hated you. The others didn't know her. Not really. The property revealed itself slowly, first a rusted gate with a lock that the brass key opened, then a winding drive through pine forest, finally a cabin that looked like it had been standing for a century. Not a cabin. A home. Stone foundation, timber frame, wraparound porch with views of a private lake. Large enough to be substantial, old enough to feel historical. And clearly maintained, despite its isolation. The roof was sound, the windows intact, the grounds showing signs of recent care. Mom, Maisie whispered. This is beautiful. I found the front door unlocked and stepped inside. The cabin was a time capsule. Furniture from another era, carefully preserved. Photographs on every surface, not the formal portraits that decorated Eleanor's city home, but candid shots of people laughing, working, living. A kitchen with cast iron pans still hanging from hooks. A library with hundreds of books, many first editions, many more filled with marginalia in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. On the central table sat another envelope with my name. Evelyn, if you're reading this, you've found the place where I was truly myself. This property has been in my name alone since 1962, hidden from accountants, lawyers, and especially family. It is worth approximately $8.7 million today, including the surrounding 340 acres and mineral rights. But that's not why I left it to you. I left it because you were the only one who ever saw me as a person rather than a resource. You listened to my stories. You asked about my life before the Winters name. You understood that wealth is not the same as worth. What I'm about to tell you will change how you see our family. In the locked study upstairs, you'll find documents I've preserved for 60 years. The truth of where the Winters' fortune actually came from. The truth of who I was before I became Eleanor Winters. I trust you to decide what to do with it. I always trusted you, my darling. You were the best of all of them. Your loving grandmother. The study was locked with a combination, my birthday, I discovered after 3 attempts. Inside, I found filing cabinets filled with documents, photographs, and records that told a story my family had spent decades hiding. The Winters textile mills hadn't just prospered. They'd prospered through exploitation, workers paid below subsistence wages, safety violations ignored, union organizers threatened and blacklisted. 3 factory fires in the 1940s had killed 47 workers, and the company had buried investigations through bribes and political connections. But that wasn't the real secret. The real secret was Eleanor herself. My grandmother wasn't born Eleanor Ashford, as the family history claimed. She was born Elena Kowalski, daughter of Polish immigrants who had worked in the very textile mills she later came to own. Her father had died in the 1943 factory fire, one of the 47 victims whose deaths were covered up by the Winters family. At 17, Elena had been beautiful, brilliant, and burning with rage. She'd changed her name, fabricated a background, and methodically positioned herself to meet and marry Richard Winters III, the heir to the fortune built on her father's death. It had taken her 5 years of careful planning, of playing a role, of becoming someone entirely new. She hadn't married for love. She'd married for revenge. The documents showed everything. Her original birth certificate. Photographs of her father at the mill. The falsified records that had concealed the fire's true causes. Correspondence with investigators she'd secretly funded for decades, gathering evidence that had never been made public. And one final document, a complete accounting of everything Eleanor had done with her personal investments over 60 years. She'd tracked down every family affected by the factory fires. She'd anonymously funded scholarships for their descendants. She'd established medical trusts for workers with industrial diseases. She'd donated millions to labor rights organizations, worker safety foundations, and immigrant assistance programs. Eleanor Winters, Elena Kowalski, had spent her entire marriage quietly redistributing the fortune that had been built on exploitation. And nobody knew. I read until dawn. Maisie fell asleep on the library sofa while I pieced together the full scope of what my grandmother had hidden. The property itself, the cabin and its 340 acres, had been purchased in 1962 as a retreat, a place where Eleanor could be Elena again, where she could remove the mask of wealthy matriarch and remember who she really was. She'd come here alone, dozens of times over the decades. The caretaker, an elderly man named Frank whose father had also worked in the mills, had maintained the property in exchange for a generous salary and absolute discretion. The final folder contained Eleanor's instructions for me. I've done what I could to make amends. But I couldn't destroy the family without destroying innocent people who depended on its stability. Richard knew nothing, he was weak but not cruel. Our children benefited from wealth they didn't choose. I leave you the choice I couldn't make. In the safe beneath the study floor, combination, your daughter's birthday, you'll find evidence sufficient to expose everything, the fires, the cover-ups, the ongoing violations that continued through the 1970s. The statute of limitations has passed for criminal charges, but the reputational damage would be devastating. You can release it, and the Winters name becomes a symbol of exploitation. You can destroy it, and the family continues as it is, flawed but functional. Or you can do what I did, use the knowledge strategically, quietly, to continue redirecting resources toward those who deserve them. Whatever you choose, know that I chose you for this because you have something the others lack, a conscience that isn't for sale. Use it well. I love you, Evelyn. I always did. The letter wasn't a slight, it was the greatest gift I could give. The others received money. You received the truth. The family meeting happened 3 weeks later. I'd called it, requesting everyone's presence at the attorney's office for a matter regarding grandmother's estate. Bradley had arrived smirking, clearly expecting me to contest the will or beg for a share of his inheritance. He wasn't smirking when I finished speaking. Let me understand this correctly, my Uncle Harrison said slowly. Mother wasn't Eleanor Ashford. She was the daughter of a factory worker who died in our family's negligence. She married father as, what? Revenge? Partly revenge. Partly opportunity to make amends. She spent 60 years redirecting Winters' money to the descendants of people our family exploited. This is insane. Cousin Vivian shook her head. You're making this up. I have documents. Photographs. Birth certificates. Financial records showing decades of anonymous donations that trace back to grandmother's personal accounts. I laid the evidence on the table. I'm not making anything up. I'm telling you who she actually was. Why? Bradley demanded. Why tell us any of this? Because grandmother left me a choice. I could expose everything publicly, destroy the family reputation, and watch the fallout. I could destroy the evidence and let you continue believing comfortable lies. Or, I paused. Or I could tell you the truth and let you decide what kind of family we want to be. The debate lasted 4 hours. Some wanted to bury everything immediately. Others wanted legal opinions on liability exposure. A few, surprisingly, wanted to continue Eleanor's quiet restitution, formalizing what she'd done informally. She gave millions to worker safety organizations, Aunt Patricia said, reading through the donation records. Education funds for factory workers' descendants. Medical support for people with industrial diseases. She looked up. This is actually admirable. She deceived our father, Harrison countered. Built their entire marriage on a lie. She built it on justice, I corrected. Father's family destroyed hers. She could have exposed them, ruined them, taken everything publicly. Instead, she married him, raised children with him, and quietly tried to fix what his family had broken. Is that deception or redemption? Nobody had an easy answer. The final decision took a month to reach. The evidence would not be released publicly, too many innocent family members would be caught in the destruction. But neither would it be destroyed. The documents would be preserved, archived by the family attorney, a reminder of what the Winters' fortune had actually cost. More importantly, Eleanor's informal restitution would become formal. The Eleanor Winters Foundation, renamed, at my suggestion, the Elena Kowalski Memorial Fund, would continue her work. Worker safety grants. Scholarships for first-generation college students from industrial communities. Medical assistance for occupational disease sufferers. The family would contribute annually. It wouldn't erase the past, but it would acknowledge it. This is insane, Bradley muttered during the final signing. We're giving away money because of something that happened 80 years ago. We're giving away money because grandmother showed us it was the right thing to do, I corrected. She spent 60 years making amends. We can spend a few decades continuing her work. The property in the Adirondacks became mine. I visit monthly now, bringing Maisie to the place where her great-grandmother had been herself. We found more documents, more photographs, more pieces of a life that Eleanor had hidden from everyone except, ultimately, me. Why do you think she chose you? Maisie asked during one visit. Because I listened. Because I asked about her life before she was rich. Because I saw her as a person, not just a grandmother. I looked around the cabin, this sanctuary where Elena Kowalski had preserved herself within Eleanor Winters. She knew I'd understand. That I wouldn't judge her for the deception, that I'd see it for what it was. What was it? Survival. Justice. The only power available to a young immigrant woman in 1955 whose father had been killed by negligence and whose family had no legal recourse. She couldn't fight the Winters' fortune directly, so she infiltrated it, married it, and spent 60 years redirecting it toward good. That's kind of amazing. Your great-grandmother was kind of amazing. The others just never knew it. My cousin's attitudes toward me shifted after the revelation. I was no longer the family disappointment who'd received just a letter. I was the keeper of secrets, the one Eleanor had trusted, the moral center of a family that hadn't known it needed one. Bradley tried to befriend me, probably calculating that proximity to the Elena Kowalski archive gave me leverage he wanted access to. I kept him at polite distance. Others were genuinely curious, wanting to understand the grandmother they'd never really known. I shared what I could, the photographs, the stories, the evidence of a woman who had played a 6-decade-long game of chess against a fortune that had wronged her family. Do you think she loved grandfather? Aunt Patricia asked once. I think she loved parts of him. The parts that were kind to her, that were good fathers to their children. But I think she also never forgot what his family did, and never stopped working to balance the scales. That sounds exhausting. It probably was. But she was strong enough to carry it. Strong enough to be Eleanor in public and Elena in private. Strong enough to give millions away without anyone noticing. And she left it all to you. She left me the truth. That's worth more than $2.3 million, Bradley's inheritance aside. The letter changed more than my bank account. It changed how I understood family, wealth, and the stories we tell ourselves about where we come from. The Winters had always believed they were old money, respectable, above reproach. Eleanor, Elena, had shown me that every fortune has origins, and not all of them bear examination. But she'd also shown me that redemption is possible. That wealth can be redirected toward healing. That even a marriage built on complicated motivations can produce love, family, and something worth preserving. I keep her final letter framed in the cabin's library now. Alongside the photograph of her father, my great-grandfather, Stefan Kowalski, standing proudly outside the mill that would kill him. The real inheritance is where we buried our secrets. She was right. The real inheritance was truth. The real inheritance was choice. The real inheritance was understanding that being trusted with someone's secrets is worth more than being trusted with their money. Maisie will inherit the cabin someday. And the archive. And the responsibility that comes with knowing who we really are, where we really came from, what was really done in our family's name. Will you tell me all of it? She asked recently. Everything about great-grandma Elena? When you're ready. It's not an easy story. But it's true. It's true. And sometimes true stories are the most important ones, especially when they're hard. She nodded, looking at the photograph of Stefan Kowalski, seeing her own features echoed in his face, the heritage Eleanor had hidden, that I had uncovered, that Maisie would someday carry forward. I'm glad she chose you, Mom. I'm glad she told us who she really was. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. They laughed because I received a letter while they received millions. They assumed grandmother's final message was confirmation of my worthlessness. But the letter held coordinates to a hidden property, keys to buried secrets, and the truth about who Eleanor Winters really was. Elena Kowalski. Daughter of immigrants. Daughter of a man killed by the family she married into. She spent 60 years making amends, redistributing wealth, and waiting for someone worthy to inherit not her money but her truth. I was that someone. The $8.7 million property was just the container. The real inheritance was understanding that the grandmother they dismissed had been a warrior all along, and she'd chosen me to continue her fight.